Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. I hope you're enjoying the festive season, and somebody who hasn't been enjoying the festive season is Lewis Hamilton. Understandably, Lewis Hamilton has not taken to finishing second place to Max Verstappen in the 2021 World Championship overly well. You know, it was under very controversial circumstances, we do have to say, but at the same time, we haven't heard much from Lewis Hamilton since. So I want to talk about what we do know from Lewis Hamilton so far leading into 2022, whether or not he will stay in Formula 1, and then finally a few different drivers I think Mercedes could go for to replace Lewis Hamilton next year if they need to. So obviously, if you missed it, I don't know where you've been, but Lewis Hamilton did miss out on the championship on the final lap of the final Grand Prix of the season. And it was under very weird, very controversial safety car conditions, which I'm not going to delve into too much today. But Toto Wolff has spoken about Lewis Hamilton feeling disillusioned and how Mercedes feel betrayed by Formula 1. So there is obviously that underlying case with Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, but we haven't been able to talk to him directly because Lewis Hamilton, the last time we spoke to him was at the post-race press conferences after Abu Dhabi, when he'd only just found out that he was going to lose out on the World Championship. We then obviously had the appeal from Mercedes also put forward. Then that was withdrawn after Hamilton and the team had decided that it was basically a lose-lose situation, whether they put in the appeal or not. And of course, Lewis Hamilton decided not to attend the end of season awards. We do know, though, that he was knighted. We have seen him back at the Mercedes factory as well. We just haven't been able to hear from him directly up to this point. So as well as that, he went dark on social media. He even unfollowed everybody, including Formula 1 and Mercedes on Instagram, which was a big talking point for the festive season and for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton in the future. As I mentioned before, the person closest to Hamilton that we have been able to hear from has been Toto Wolff in this time. And he said that both he and Lewis love the sport of Formula 1, and that's clear to see. Lewis Hamilton has been in this sport since he was a kid. It's been his dream to be in Formula 1, but both are feeling disillusioned about what took place in Abu Dhabi and how the FIA and the stewards sort of went about their business at the final race of the season. And he feels that the random decision-making from the FIA may make him fall out of love with the sport. Now, he was talking about himself and Lewis Hamilton as sort of one in this press conference. So obviously he's talked to Lewis Hamilton and will be in contact with him pretty much every day, I would imagine. And he's saying that, you know, both of them feel a little bit unjust. And he said that himself, it's the effort, the blood, sweat and tears. Is that all worth it when seemingly it doesn't matter on track? Seemingly, as he put it, these random decisions can completely change the swing of a season. So even saying it will be a long time for them to digest it and they may never be over it, which is punchy from Toto Wolff, and I think, you know, talks for Lewis Hamilton a little bit as well there, in that if it was me, obviously I can't put myself in the situation of Lewis Hamilton. I'm not a 7-time world champion, but I would also feel a little bit unjust if the world championship was sort of seemingly snatched away from me at the death of the final race of the season. So I want to talk about first, will he actually leave Formula 1? So Hamilton has a contract with Mercedes for another 2 seasons. And of course, we know that next year he is going to be joined by George Russell in the Mercedes team. So there's quite a few different moving parts to as to whether or not he will leave the team next year. Clearly, we're still seeing Lewis Hamilton performing at the absolute highest level. Last year, he came second in the World Championship. He still won what could have been 9 races. And he was just so incredibly close to lifting that title, even in what, in my opinion, was the worst car over the course of the entire season. So he is still absolutely phenomenal when it comes to racing. He is still one of the best drivers, if not the best driver, on the grid every single time we enter a Grand Prix. But it's realistically come down to whether or not Lewis Hamilton, one, wants to bother with learning all the new regulations. We know that 2022 is a big step forward for lots and lots of the teams in Formula 1. It's a complete shakedown of what we've seen before and a brand new era of Formula 1 that we're entering into. Does he really want to step into that new era of Formula 1 for 2 more years, knowing that, Mercedes might not be the team that they have been and the dominant that they have been over the last 8 to 10 years. And he might, have a brand new pressure from George Russell coming into the team, being very, very vocal, George Russell, about wanting to win races, wanting to be at the front of the pack. Will he, want to battle with a teammate like that again, similar to what he had with Rosberg or when Bottas first came into the team? Although Bottas was never really given that step forward, was he? And also, as Toto Wolff said, does Lewis Hamilton still have that passion for the sport? He has been doing it since he was a child. He's been wanting to get into Formula One forever, obviously made that step up in the mid-2000s, has been at the absolute pinnacle of the sport, winning 7 world championships, hundreds of races, literally hundreds of pole positions also. He's done everything that he can. He's achieved almost everything that you possibly can outside of winning a world record world championship. He has done it all. So will he still have that drive? Will he still have that determination to come back into Formula One? And the final thing for me that Lewis Hamilton needs to think about is, will he have the faith in the systems around him moving forward as well? Because he has to believe that Formula One is accessible to him for those continued wins and another world championship eventually. If he thinks the cards are stacked against him, what's the point in entering? What is the point in going forward with this sport where you cannot win? So I think Lewis Hamilton will probably end up staying, in my personal opinion, but I think there's also quite a few reasons why he might leave also. And that's the interesting part. So I want to talk about, if he does decide to leave, who are the drivers that could take his place? So hypothetically, let's say Lewis Hamilton decides to leave Formula One. That only gives Mercedes 2 months to find a driver. And let's be fair, most drivers will probably want a seat in a Mercedes. It's likely that Mercedes will be back at the top of the grid. They won the Constructors' Championship this year. So you'd imagine that most drivers would like that seat, especially if Valtteri Bottas is moving away and George Russell is coming in. George Russell obviously going to be new to the team as well. And that's where the first driver I was thinking about comes in. They could just get Valtteri Bottas back again. Yes, George Russell is coming into the team, but if they don't want 2 drivers that are absolutely brand new to Mercedes coming in for this new regulations, Valtteri Bottas is a pretty good, safe pair of hands. We've seen him win Constructors' Championships with Mercedes. He knows the team, obviously knows the background of the team. He knows what the team wants and expects every single race weekend. And let's be honest, he'd be stepping back into a winning team from Alfa Romeo, which he's just moved to. But again, I guess it would go down to whether or not the project Alfa Romeo has been sold to him, because lots of people thought he was going to move to Williams, and then sort of last minute turned to Alfa Romeo for Valtteri Bottas. And in terms of the contract that he's got there, it may be impossible for him to move back to Mercedes. Also, if he was going to go back to a team like Mercedes that's never really shown him any faith or any belief, would he really want to go back in there? Would he just become the number 2 again? Would Mercedes still see George Russell as the number 1, as the Hamilton replacement almost, and then Bottas would just go back to being that Bottas role within the team? That then comes up to Nick de Vries, who I think is also a very good pick for Mercedes, has been in the Mercedes program for a long time, has been in and around the team, again, knows the inside and outsides of Mercedes and has a little bit of background with them. Obviously a Formula 2 and a Formula E world champion now, but might crumble under that pressure. Obviously, it is a big step up into Formula 1. We've talked about how Formula 2 and Formula E are incredibly competitive championships, but Formula 1 just does seem to be a completely different beast in and of itself. And, Nick de Vries been on the peripheries for a little while now. It's whether or not Mercedes would genuinely, expect him to make that step up. A rookie season in Formula 1 alongside a George Russell in his 4th season, but obviously his 1st season with Mercedes. Yes, he knows the team, knows the staff, but would that be enough to get him into the seat? Where I'm talking about that inexperience is where I then thought maybe they might go for someone like a Sebastian Vettel. I don't think this is the worst choice in the world for Mercedes. I think the Mercedes could do a lot worse than going for a Sebastian Vettel. Obviously has that Germany connection, obviously has that Michael Schumacher connection as well. And we've seen how He is just an incredibly experienced head when it comes to Formula One. Again, has those race wins, has those pole positions, has those world championships to show you that he is the real deal. And he'd often be able to play that engineering role inside the car as well. I think that's the main reason why Aston Martin pivoted away from Sergio Perez and moved towards Sebastian Vettel, was the things he can do off the track and in the paddock as well. And Mercedes might, think, with George Russell coming in, being quite a raw talent, maybe they need an old head, some experienced shoulders to go alongside George Russell, and Sebastian Vettel is by far and away one of the best picks you can get there. Did okay this season, obviously ended up coming 12th in the Drivers' Championship, 43 points, a couple of podiums in there, obviously one of them was taken away, but a couple of podiums in there in terms of his racing. He has that ability still to battle up front. He has that ability still to be one of the main drivers in a team, and from a Mercedes perspective, they're wanting to, be a Constructors' Champion again. George Russell is going to come into the team. We know George Russell can get points. He's managed to pick up points in a Williams here, there. But we know that Sebastian Vettel can pick up points. We know that he will consistently pick up points in a car that is given to him. And just podiums and everything that he brings to the team. If they're going for a Constructors' Championship again, if they need some experience, they need some guidance for George Russell, Vettel has absolutely everything you could want from a Formula One driver. It's just whether or not they believe that, one, they could get him in, because obviously he's sold onto this Aston Martin project, and secondarily, whether or not he would play that second fiddle to George Russell, or whether or not he'd want to maybe go for one last world title, one last few race wins, and that might then sort of start to cause a little bit of tension between the two. As we've seen, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll on the track often do butt heads. So that's when I thought maybe they go for somebody else linked to Mercedes, maybe outside of Nick de Vries. I thought Ocon is also a pretty good choice for Mercedes. Like de Vries, obviously has the Mercedes links in the past, but also now has Formula One experience, which Nick de Vries does not. So I was talking about Bottas and Vettel and how they obviously have that experience in Formula One. They're a good set of shoulders. Ocon is almost there. He's been in Formula One a little while now, and obviously has been on the peripheries of a lot of different teams. Obviously didn't really get the chance behind Daniel Ricciardo, was always seen as the second driver there. And then Alonso this year has just managed to pip into the post in terms of points as well. But he did manage to get his first race victory this year, so he is slowly becoming one of those drivers that is a consistent head in Formula One. Yes, doesn't have the experience of lots of different teams and lots of different projects, but does have the experience of just being there, being in the points consistently this year, and knowing what it takes to battle at the front as well. We've seen him at the front of the grid twice this season, and obviously just pipped by Valtteri Bottas to a second podium this season as well. So I think personally Ocon is a really good choice for Mercedes. I'm not sure Ocon would want to make that switch. I think it might be tough to actually prize him out of Alpine. Alpine did really well to finish 5th in the Constructors' Championship this year. He's got an incredible relationship with Fernando Alonso, and moving into next year, if we look up and down the grid, they've got one of the best team combinations, I think, the Alpine guys, in Alonso and Ocon, in that those two just seemingly do absolutely everything and anything for each other. We've seen Alonso defend for Ocon's win. We've seen Ocon give it absolutely everything he could to try and get Alonso a podium as well. They've got an incredible relationship there that I'm not sure Ocon would want to leave. So then I was thinking, okay, someone similar to Ocon, but maybe a little bit more accessible and maybe in a project that he might not want to be part of in the future. I thought Pierre Gasly. So Pierre Gasly obviously has been part of the Red Bull system for his entirety of his F1 career. Has been moved into AlphaTauri, then up to Red Bull, and then back again. But I think, personally, Pierre Gasly needs to get outside of this Red Bull system. We've just seen Pierre Gasly put together an absolutely sensational season, and he's shown that with the right car, under the right circumstances, he can put himself absolutely anywhere on that grid. We've seen him on the front row. We've seen him consistently 4th, 5th, and 6th in terms of qualifying. It's been the race pace of the AlphaTauri which has let him down a little bit, as well as a few mistakes and also a few terrible decisions from AlphaTauri when it's come to strategy this year as well. But I think Pierre Gasly is a very accessible driver for Mercedes. I think he will want to move out of that Red Bull system and can do what Lewis Hamilton does in terms of consistently putting it in pole, consistently getting points for the team, possibly, not winning a world championship or anything like that. But I think, he's shown this year, even with a teammate in Yuki Tsunoda, came very, very close to single-handedly winning 5th place for AlphaTauri in the Constructors' Championship. So that's my thoughts. That's my thoughts on Bottas, De Vries, Vettel, Ocon, Gasly. Out of those 5, do you think any of them would be the pick for Mercedes? When it comes to replacing Lewis Hamilton, obviously, it's incredibly stupid shoes to try and fill. It is maybe the most difficult place to take on the grid. He is a phenomenal driver, a wonderful, wonderful advocate for Formula One as well. And whoever tries to fill that gap is going to have to step up massively. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who is going to replace Lewis Hamilton if he does decide to retire? Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.